Hello, everybody, and welcome. Come on in, get comfy, pull up a chair, and join us for another episode today. We are excited because you could be anywhere on the web watching anything. There's so much available for you to watch, but we are honored, whether you're live or on the replay, that you are joining us and celebrating another episode with us today. I'd like to invite you to take a moment, click the love button, click the like button, click the share button so that more people can enjoy this show with us today. My name is Jessica Dugas, intuitive mentor and energy healer.
And my name is Donna Brown, and I'm a holistic wellness practitioner. And this is The Breakthrough. It is a spiritual view for your soul and mind where we dig deep on today's spiritual hot topics and inspire you with the stories of those breakthrough moments that change all of our lives.
So we are super excited today because we have another amazing show. Our guest is our friend Suzanne Doolin, owner of Sadhana. She's been a yogi for over 20 years and is now helping other yogis deepen their path of yoga so that they can show up confidently and attract students that are eager to learn. Suzanne's going to be sharing with her story of spiritual awakening. Do you know someone who's also going through a spiritual awakening right now? If you haven't already, I invite you to take a moment and click that share button to share this episode out so that all those that are going through their awakening know that they're not alone. And while you're doing that, we're going to get to hot topics. So we have three fabulous panelists on with us today. We have, first and foremost, Jamad Kelly, who is our empowerment coach. We're going to bring him onto the screen. We have the fabulous Tara Abram, who's joining us, and she is going to be sharing with us. She's a meditation teacher. She is the Jane of all things, and of course the Jane of the juicy conversations as well. So Tara's joining us today, and we also have our friend Lori Ann Davis joining us, who is our relationship specialist, and she of course helps us keep grounded in our relationships as we're going through these breakthrough moments. So welcome everybody today to the show. I'm so excited to have all of you guys on as panelists today. I like it when we have a lot of panelists. It's a lot of fun, right?
Me too. I do too. Yes. Exciting. So let's get started. So today's hot topic, very timely, very, very timely. So using negativity as a learning tool, Jessica, what do you think? Should we take negativity and turn it into a learning tool, or should we just kind of use negativity to kind of like keep us down a little bit and not moving forward?
You mean down that rabbit hole we like to talk about?
Yes, the rabbit hole that I like to go down and take you with me.
Dragging me, not always kicking and screaming, because sometimes I like to go down there. But I found I found this meme from Light Watkins, who's an amazing meditation teacher. If you guys haven't heard of him, go check out his Facebook page. But he had this meme that it cracked me up. It says, my spiritual teachers in order of importance. Number one, the people who annoy the living shit out of me. And number two, all other spiritual teachers. So
you said a bad word.
I did. I just thought it was so funny and just so true, because when we have when we have negative people in our lives or negative circumstances, it's like anything else where we have a choice, and we can let it bring us down, like you said, or we can choose to learn from it. And I prefer the latter, though sometimes like I said, I think sometimes we can go down that rabbit hole. But how do you guys, I'd like to hear from all the panelists on how easy is it for you to use negative people or negative circumstances in your life as a tool rather than something that brings us down?
Well, coming from my perspective, we learn and grow through relationships, right? So we actually, I think, pick relationships that sometimes trigger us so that we have that availability to learn and grow. And so initially when we're triggered, it doesn't feel good, right? But then if we can step back and say, it's not really the other person, it's me. I'm the one who's being triggered. I'm the one who's feeling this way. So it's an opportunity for us to look at what's being drawn to the surface, what's being brought into the light that we can take a look at and that we can then grow from. So as much as it doesn't feel like it sometimes in the moment, it really is a great opportunity for growth if we'll just allow it to be.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree. And I know sometimes we, I know for me, sometimes I kind of got to wallow in it for a minute so that I can kind of get back to that observer's standpoint and kind of look down at it. Kind of like last week, I had to wallow in that for a few minutes. And then it was like, wait a minute, you know, I got to pull myself back and go, wait a minute, there's a lesson here. And what is that lesson? There's something that's triggered that I need to look at, and I need to figure out why it's triggering me. So I agree. I think that they are really good lesson learners and help us grow and help us be able to heal that part of us that needs healing from whatever is being triggered in that moment. So what did you think, Tara?
Well, I also think too, it's like a good reminder of like the energy that you don't want to surround yourself with too, right? And why is that coming up? And so, yeah, I love what Lori said. And, yeah, that's kind of how I approach it sometimes. It's like exactly like what Lori said. It's like, where's the learning? What's that? But I do find it's like, okay, I don't want to be in this environment. I don't like this type of energy around me. Why don't I like it around me? And then how do I change my perception, you know, and shift it? Or is it something that I just want to then realize I need to move and grow from and leave it behind kind of thing? So.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh yeah, I was getting ready to chime in. So one thing about it is, as you all know, I am traveling across the country. Yesterday I was in Sedona, Arizona. It was real cool, hippie trippy. The reason why I'm on this spiritual road trip is because I lost 2 friends that I was just like, you know what? Before I lose any other friends, I need some me time. I need to learn more about myself. So really, and this trip has been amazing. So I kind of want to send thank you letters to all the people that pissed me off over the last couple. So, I mean, because they really pushed me to want better for myself and want to do better, you know, in my environment and the things that I enjoy. Because some people just aren't your tribe, right?
Right. That's very true. I agree. And like Lori said, some people come into our lives, to trigger us sometimes so that we can bring things up and start and figure out what we need to heal in that moment. So I agree. And I love your, Jamaat, I love your journey that you're taking and some of your videos that you've been putting up. So if you're not a friend of Jamaat's on Facebook, you need to go over there because he's got some really good videos going right now, especially kind of along these lines that we're talking about today too, right, Jamaat?
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to keep the people informed. So, spiritual awakening thing, which is hell, but a lot of good is coming out of it. Spiritual awakenings are hell. You're going to have them for the rest of your life, but a lot of good comes out of them. So,
right.
Yeah, I think everything that I've seen so many different things from you, Jamaat, and from all of us really lately kind of around this topic. And I also think that that it goes really good with, you know, off of what we were talking about last week as well with that THINK acronym and, you know, thinking before you speak and all of that. Because I think that, you know, in those moments when we're surrounded with people that aren't using that acronym that just let everything out, you know, we could very easily get down on ourselves and so choosing to use that as a tool. And I love what Tara was talking about as well. With knowing that that's not how you want to be, that's not what you want in your life. And so it can be, even if we don't use it as a tool per se, it can give us, I think, that good look at of what we don't want, and give us a direction to go with that. What are some of the things that you guys do to surround, to kind of have those healthy boundaries, to kind of maybe limit the negativity in your life?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Anybody? Go ahead.
I'll go.
Sorry, my son did something funny and I was fixing it. Go ahead, Tara.
Well, something I've actually started doing recently, it was, I don't remember who suggested it to me, but I've been setting a timer on my phone now every couple hours to just kind of like check in and be like, how am I feeling? What's up? Like, what's my vibe right now? And if I'm not feeling like spicy, I'll turn on some tunes or something like that, you know, do a few deep breaths and kind of just get a little bit into a more high vibe space. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Actually, I've been finding it's kind of like, it's a fun reminder, and you can like put like a fun little song on your phone when everything goes off, like something like that, just to kind of, yeah, just check in, you know, so that you don't get too far into, because like, if you know, sometimes you can have like, you know, stub your toe in the morning or something like that. It sets you off like kind of in a grouchy mood for the day, but you don't want to stay in that vibe all day. So yeah, it's been kind of a fun tool.
That's a good one.
That is a good, and I do the, I do song, like I set my timer to go off to do one of my power songs. I have like 5 of them, so they kind of rotate. And then I jump on my rebounder while I'm listening to that, and I'm doing all kinds of crazy dancing and screaming and singing at the top of my lungs. My neighbors probably think I'm crazy. But that kind of gets my vibe back up, and then I can go and take care of what I need to take care of in the next hour. I usually try to do it every hour. That's kind of what I'm doing. What do you do, Jamar?
Me, myself personally, recently my guides, they were like, every time you have a negative thought, let it pass on by and then switch it to a self-love thought. So whenever I'm sitting here like, oh, you know, something odd or stressful or negative or whatever comes up, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let that thought pass. I'm just gonna be like, okay, Jamar, I love you so much. You're doing great. You know, just give myself a little self-love moment and just say, forget everything else, right? So,
I love those. So I do some of those too. So now I'm trying to think about what's different. So the one that's different for me is almost the opposite. I tend to be high energy and high vibe, and you know, so much of the time that when something happens, I'll go sit out on my back patio and I'll watch the birds and I'll watch the butterflies in my flower garden. And so it's that tapping into nature and putting my focus on nature, which is very peaceful and very calming, and it's always abundant and it always seems positive. And that will help recenter me so that then when I go back to whatever it is I'm thinking about, frequently I have a different perspective or I'll have a different idea. I did that this morning and had a whole new approach came to me before a phone call I needed to make. And so it's that being quiet and being in nature frequently works for me to shift that vibe when I need to.
Yes, such great ideas from everybody. I think it's important, you know, to have those boundaries. I think for me, I do very similar things that all of you do, and just I think the biggest thing for me is lessening that time. So if I'm finding myself getting sucked in by someone or something that's negative, to lessen that time between being stuck in that space of negativity and pulling myself out of it. And so that's always my goal, is to kind of just continue to lessen that time in that space of negativity and move forward from there. So really good topic, everybody, and I think it's a good one for everybody to think out. So we would love, if you are watching live with us right now, to chime in below and let us know how this looks in your life. Do you use negativity, negative people, negative circumstances as a tool in your life, or do you find yourself getting sucked down that rabbit hole with Donna and I? So let us know. Let us know how that looks.
Company in our rabbit hole.
Yes, we need company. Yes, for sure. So let us know how that looks for you in your life, and we of course will go back in and chime in on it later. But it's time now to bring on our guest today. I'm really excited to have her on today. Suzanne, as I mentioned earlier, has been a yogi for over 20 years, and she's now sharing her knowledge with other yogis so that they can improve their practice. Everybody, please hit that really loud noise. Everybody, please hit that heart button, hit the love button, and welcome our friend Suzanne Doolin to the show today. Suzanne, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. Yay! So we would love to know, Suzanne, starting us off today, how do you feel about today's hot topic? Do you tend to use negative people and experiences in your life as a tool, or do you find yourself getting sucked down that rabbit hole from time to time too?
I can't hear her.
I think you are muted, Suzanne.
Mama. Mama.
No, she's there. Now
I'm here. You should be able to hear me now.
There you go.
Yeah, it's my microphone. Every now and then it cuts out like that. So just let me know if you don't hear me, and I know how to get it kickstarted again. I apologize.
It's all good.
On the topic. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate
Somebody just called on my phone and I put the voicemail and they left me a voicemail. Sorry, we should be done now.
It sounds like a train, like honk, honk.
I thought it was outside.
That's a reminder to stop and be positive.
Leave it to Donna. Sorry, go ahead. I should be done now.
Well, when we got on the call, it reminded me that I actually had a workshop where this became the topic. And we opened up and everybody really wanted to talk about what do you do when you're around somebody who kind of sucks all the oxygen out of the room. And what I really learned out of that experience was a lot about what Lori was talking about, that it's the attempt to hold the boundaries that really becomes stressful. And what I learned was that paradoxically, sort of not holding the boundaries and being able to be fluid was actually easier. And sometimes when I'm around someone who is like that, who's very difficult to be around, letting my guard down a little bit can be a huge relief. Sometimes sitting there the whole time, trying to sort of keep them out of my space emotionally becomes such effort. And then to just be able to connect with them with compassion is much easier than resisting all the time. So that's my little tip about other people.
I love that. I love it. I love that everybody kind of has different ways of going about that. Kind of dealing with the negativity. I think it's a good thing to always have lots of different tools to deal with that in your life. So I appreciate you chiming in on that, Suzanne. But I would love to get into your story today because you're going to be sharing with us something that I think every single one of us on the panel today has gone through and maybe are continuing to go through, and something that I know that our viewers are watching as well. So I would love for you to start by taking us back to the time before your big spiritual awakening.
Okay. I also want to say, you said that other people are going through this, and it's one of the reasons I want to talk about it, because I used to not really talk about this experience. And it prevented me from learning and connecting with other people. And it's part of why I've started to talk about it now. Before, I grew up in a family that was very intellectual. I went to a very intellectual high school. It's kind of similar to Eton, only it's in Alabama, which people don't believe that exists, but Indian Springs School. I actually was raised on the campus of that school. My father was a teacher there, so I was surrounded in a very intellectual environment growing up. My family was not connected to spirituality. We were not, we didn't go to, my mother was Jewish, my father was not. So we didn't go to temple, we didn't go to church. I was not particularly, we did sometimes celebrate some holidays, but not particularly religiously or spiritually. I won't say there was like no spiritual upbringing at all, but it just wasn't really the way that my family was tuned in. It was a very logical type of upbringing. So before I was kind of disconnected from my emotional self and certainly not focused on spiritual life other than astrology. I was very interested in astrology.
You don't often hear at least in the background that I've come from, you don't often hear about people who are kind of growing up in faith of some kind, of going to church and things like that, and also being interested in astrology, and that's okay. It's not usually something that you see together. Did your family or parents or anything know that was something that interested you?
I think it was something that I got into by reading. My family, we were all voracious readers. So I believe that my parents maybe had some kind of astrology book, and with their vast collection of many, many things. And so I think at some point I just picked it up and started getting interested in it. They knew I was. I mean, it wasn't like they were opposed to anything that wasn't like totally logical. It wasn't like that, but it was just, I would say that was like maybe my little crack in to something more spiritual was through astrology that really interested me. My brother was interested in tarot cards. So, there was something there, but we were not really raised up with a lot of, like, oh, let's take there weren't a lot of spiritual rituals in our lives. Occasionally, but not. It was more of a special holiday type of thing than an everyday thing for us to connect to spirituality.
So then take us through, what happened in your life when you realized that or maybe you didn't even realize at the time, when you went through your spiritual awakening. What was that like for you? And tell us the circumstances about that, not having been in a spiritual world.
Right. So what happened to me was that in Zen Buddhism, they call it a Satori experience. And it means that it's literally an awakening experience. So it was a very sudden experience. I was in college. I went to Tulane University, and on my sophomore year, I had my own dorm room. I would say probably the day before, I probably went out to the bar, had a few drinks, was planning to sleep in late and go to my classes. Like, I was a college student in New Orleans. That was my life. I was not, there was nothing. I think that possibly what was going on in my life was that I was coming to the end of a relationship, and that was possibly the thing that drove it. But one thing is that I didn't really know what caused it. And eventually I realized that asking that question wasn't going to be that valuable to me. So I woke up one day in an altered state of consciousness. And I was there in my dorm room, and I woke up it was before the sun rose, which is, a little minor miracle if you're a college student to, actually get up before the sun rose. And I remember I just woke up and I felt like almost like a little kid, it wasn't like I was just awake. It was like, whoa, I'm awake. I'm alive. I'm ready. Jump out of bed. And that was a feeling familiar from like being a little child, but I had not experienced it as an adult before, that feeling of aliveness in me. I sat there in bed and thought, this day is going to change your life. And the voice that was coming through me was, I call it my heart voice. Like, it was a different way of talking to myself. We all talk to ourselves, like we were just talking about how you talk to yourself with negativity. And one of the big things about how I talked with myself that day was that I talked to myself with kindness. And also I talked to myself, there was a sense of something larger, and that it was being sort of channeled through me, rather than that it was me talking, but it was a sense of a bigger sense of self that was talking to myself, and not that same sort of limited sense of self that was in my head, my normal head voice. And so that I woke up and I was in this altered state of consciousness. I recognized that something was different. And I just said, okay, game's on. And for that whole day, I stayed in this shifted state of consciousness. And at the end of the day, it sort of faded away. And for a few days after, it's a little less and a little less and a little less. And then over time, every now and then I could pop into that mood for just a moment. I'd be talking to someone, I'd feel that sense of connection to them, and then it'd fade away. So it wasn't until I started yoga in my junior year that I started to find a way to shift my consciousness on a regular basis. And it wasn't like every single time it would be at that intensity that I felt it the first time, but I could consistently go into that state when I practiced yoga. And so that's why I started practicing yoga so young, is in order, as I immediately saw the effect of it and knew that it was my path.
So you talk about, this experience that you went through and the intensity of it. Tell me a little bit about the emotions that you were feeling. Like, what were you actually experiencing in this? Like the emotions, any physical feelings? What were you going through inside?
So, first of all, there was a sense of calm and a sense of trust in myself. And I was very assured without being overconfident. The other emotion that really stuck with me, and it's part of the reason I didn't really talk about this experience, was humility, and that sense of really being connected to people, but also humbled, genuinely humbled, not like, oh, I'm less than you, but like really appreciative of other people in a way that I think is hard to find. I think that's the hardest piece for me to find, is that sense of humility with other people, where I feel that I'm totally respecting where they're coming from. So so what happened during that day was that I woke up and then I took a shower, and I remember the water was like everything, all the sensory perceptions were much stronger. Sometimes I haven't done like a lot of drugs or anything like that, but people who do like ecstasy, things like that, they'll talk about these kind of experiences of being very connected to sense of touch, sensations, everything visually much stronger. That was noticeable that day. I went down, and after I got dressed, I sat down on my balcony, and today I would say I meditated, but not really having been raised with that. I would say for a long time that I just sat on the balcony and watched the sunrise over the business school at Tulane. And I was over watching, I remember, I sort of felt like I downloaded this whole instruction manual for life. And during that day, I was looking up at the sky, and there were the clouds were scudding across the sky. It was like, little wispy clouds. And I remember thinking, we're like these clouds. We think that we're separate, but actually we're all being moved by the same force. And that was really the biggest perspective of the day, was that sense of shift from a perspective of myself and the little cloud scudding along, thinking that I'm in charge of my life, and recognizing that all of us together are being moved by a bigger force. So I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions, and I'll tell you about the rest of the day if you like.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So because you were, I know you were in college, but you were younger. So when all of this was going on, were you aware? I don't really know how to ask this question. It's like, how did you get yourself to where you understood what was going on? And that's not really how I want to ask the question, but I just can't.
I woke up knowing. In fact, I had this long conversation in my head that I knew that day was going to change my life. And I remember like this other voice, my normal head voice, that negative voice, was saying, oh, there you go, you're just full of yourself. But there was this incredible confidence that I had that really said, no, it's not that. It's not that thing where you're overconfident. It's that thing. It was something new that was knowing. absolutely knowing. And it was as somebody who was raised very logically, it was weird and unsettling not to be able to talk myself out of it. And eventually I realized that I couldn't win the argument, that it was not a theoretical, it was not a debate. This was something that was real, and it was turned on me, and I couldn't, there wasn't an off switch. There wasn't a talking myself out of it. I had to go along for the ride. So I knew from the moment I woke up that it was something different. And it's part of the reason I didn't speak about it, because I thought, well, people hear this, they'll think that I'm some kind of guru and then I had something special. But over time, I found, as I learned more and more about yoga and started talking with people, what I found is a lot of people have had these kinds of experiences. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they're also afraid to talk about them for many of the same reasons. And then by not talking about them, we can't learn more about how to create these experiences in our lives. I don't know that it's possible to create a moment like that, but I do know that with a consistent practice of yoga, that I've been able to shift into a state of this where there's a level of it in my life all the time, and where sometimes I return back to that state in a deeper way.
So would you say that it changed your path that you were originally on the day before this started happening? I know you talked about yoga and getting involved in yoga, but did you have one path that you were going down, and then you woke up and this wonderful, I'm sure it didn't feel wonderful at the time, but this wonderful experience was happening, and then you found that your path kind of...
And then I was just hanging out with the angels from there on out, right?
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's I think it's Jack Kornfield has a book. It's like first the mountaintop, then the laundry. Yeah. So all I remember about the next semester was a lot of bad choices. Or as you could say, fully embracing New Orleans.
So were you trying to squelch what was happening at the time?
Because I think I was frustrated because it had happened. I didn't know how it happened. I didn't know how to make it happen again. And I've been given this clear guidance to be like that all the time. And then it was very easy. That was the thing, was the hard thing is to not stay in that state. And the easiest thing is to shift into it. But the thing is, it's easy if you know how to shift it. But I had no idea how I did it. Mm-hmm. And so I think I was really frustrated by the fact that I didn't even really know how to ask the questions. And then when I would look for information, what information I did find told me that if you have an experience like that, and I'd read, particularly in Zen Buddhism, they're very big into these experiences, Satori experiences. So the way it works in Zen Buddhism is you meditate and you practice and you study for years and years and years, and then you have a Satori moment, and then basically you're done. They're like, that's the whole thing, is to shoot for that moment. And every now and then people will go into them like I did spontaneously. But I was like, well, thanks a lot, because I hadn't had no training. So I was like, well, even though all of the teaching was in there, it's true, without any kind of real understanding of how to do it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really, I won't say it wasn't valuable, because it really was all in that moment. But it was just, I think there was a lot of conflict within myself around knowing what to do, knowing that it was easy to do, and then not being able to do it.
So you know what the relationship specialist is going to ask you, right? I want to know how, after this experience, how it changed your interactions with other people.
I think they became extremely chaotic shortly thereafter. I think I was on a real roller coaster ride of the next semester. And I honestly, that next semester after that, because it happened, I think in October. And then the next semester, it was just like probably one of the wildest semesters that I had in college. And so I do often wonder, like, where did that, like, why, why did I have this mountaintop experience and then have such a kind of wild and crazy semester in the next semester? I had some really close friends at that time who were very interesting. They did a lot of drugs. They did tested a lot of boundaries. And they were, it was a lot of fun to hang out with them for the next couple of months. That was a really close-knit group of people. I think that it was sort of moving me out of those kind of relationships ultimately on a path to move me away from those, but it probably took me 2 years before it really hit.
Right. I was going to say that once you kind of got into yoga more and you could get back in touch with that more at will, do you think that changed your relationships with people and how you interacted with them in any way?
Eventually what happened was that I went through this really difficult period when between my junior and senior years. And I think it was the fact that I had this experience and did have yoga that gave me strength to start really, really deeply shifting my behaviors and looking at myself. But it was getting to a place where I was really, I would say, almost disgusted with myself and the things that I was doing that felt so off, that caused me to look around at my friendships and recognize that they were unhealthy. And then I began to really move out of addictions. I was a cigarette smoker at the time. And I quit smoking my senior year. And then I kind of moved out of that circle of friends and started to actually have a lot of grown-up friends. It's kind of weird. But yeah, it took a while. And I think that for people who are listening and trying to figure out how does this apply to my life, I think expecting spiritual transformations, even though it was a sudden transformation of a day, the results of it have taken my whole life to unpack. So I don't think that spiritual transformations, even dramatic ones like mine, just overnight change your life. And I do think that it's important to have support. And by not talking about it, I ended up keeping myself away from the people who probably could have helped me to find that support.
Everybody's silent.
You want to hear more?
We're all just
More
like,
about what happened? It was such a crazy day.
So I want to ask really quickly because I've been to Mardi Gras, I've been in New Orleans. It's a fun place, really crazy though. So when over time that you started to learn more about yourself and you began to come out of the spiritual closet, right? How were you received by the people who've known you all your life, and how did people take that when you're like, hey, I'm calm and I'm centered, that stuff y'all got going on, I don't know about that. So I mean, what was that like?
I think I've been a force for change. I think that people in my family have, as a result of some of the things that I have done, have started to make changes themselves. So one of the things that a lot of the stuff that I read immediately afterward that resonated with me was Zen Buddhist stuff. And it may have just been because one of my teachers at college he's very into Zen Buddhism. And so I think maybe I was just somewhat aware of that work. So they debated for a while this idea of becoming a Buddhist, but I was like, well, when I really think about the daily practices of being a Buddhist, it doesn't really relate to me. I mentioned that my mother was Jewish and my father was not. There was a big rift between my mother and her parents over that, because she was raised in the 50s and it was not seen as very cool to marry somebody who wasn't Jewish. So when I was married to my first husband, I realized that it was important to me to have a ceremony that was religious. And I realized that although it had not been a big practice in my life, that the one that had the most meaning to me was Judaism. And I began to, going into that marriage, I started to become more serious about my Judaism. which I continue to do today. In fact, I'm wearing a Jewish star that my good friend Pam gave me from my temple. And so I've become very involved in Judaism. And as a result of the work that I've done, my mother has returned to Judaism. She sort of was welcomed back into her family when I had a Jewish wedding. And then not that she had been, a total, but she was a little bit of a black sheep because she was not involved with it. And she started to become welcomed back into her family. And over time, she has become more and more involved in Judaism herself. So I think that the way that I affected people, and this is really one of the big things, was that when you are on a spiritual path, you affect other people. And it's part of the reason you have to show up. It's part of the reason you have to do the work, is to make an impact on other people. In fact, I'll tell you a little more about that day, because that was a specific teaching of that day. At the end of the day, as the night was falling, there was a cord around the quad that was in front of my dorm, and the cord was to protect the newly seeded grass. I didn't want people walking on the quad, so I was trailing my hand along this rough cord and just experiencing, like I said, I was very sensory. So I was just experiencing this rough cord. So I went to my room. These were single dorm rooms. And the girl 2 doors down, she comes and she knocks on the door. And she said, I've never wanted to know you before, but I saw you walking around the quad, trailing your hand along that cord. And I just want to come over and introduce myself. And I felt like I wanted to get to know you. So we ended up talking for like an hour. And she became a good friend of mine at college. But, people see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to be it's good to be turned on, and for other people to see that, because you change them too.
That's really cool. I just wanted to ask, I was curious, because you had mentioned earlier that like astrology was kind of your crack kind of thing that led you in. And I'm just curious, was it something that you continue to follow or dive into deeper? Like I've always been, it's been my thing since I was probably I don't even remember how little I was. I just love it, right? And I still continue to learn more and more about it because there's so much, right?
I love astrology.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And I did continue it. I didn't stay with it as strongly. I had a kind of funny experience with it, actually, with that same girl. We had my good friend, Kelly. She was also very into astrology like me, and crystals and things like that. So she had gotten this book about sex signs. And a whole group of us in the dorm sat up one night reading our sex signs out. And there was a girl, the same girl, I'm trying to remember her name, but she was there with her boyfriend. And everything that we read about them, she was giggling and stuff. So the next day, my friend Kelly came back and she said, Suzanne, we read all the wrong ones. We miscalculated all those moon signs or whatever it was we were supposed to be reading. So then the same girl, she knocks on my door. She says, Suzanne, I just have to tell you, every single thing you read was totally true. So I didn't have the heart to tell her that we had read her the wrong one. But it's funny because I still know, I actually planned my daughter's birth. There were 3, she's a Sagittarius, and that was the first month that I could have had her. And then it would have been Capricorn and then Aquarius. And I was like, okay, all 3 of those, I would love to have one of those babies. So I actually planned her birth around what sign she would be. Yeah, I definitely continued to, but I didn't get, it was clear to me that yoga was my path. So for people who are doing those things, I've been around people who tarot is their thing. Astrology is their thing. It's for me, it's yoga, but everybody has that doorway in. And it doesn't mean that for the fact that for me, there was that moment where I realized like, this isn't my path. It doesn't mean that like, it's not a valid path for other people. And I think that's hard for people to understand, that these tools that we use to shift into an intuitive state, they're just tools, and they don't, not the same tools work for everybody.
I love that. And we are coming close to the end of our time together, Suzanne, but I would love for you to share with us if you feel like this moment was it for you, or if you feel like you continue to have spiritual awakenings in your life now.
Oh, for sure, I do. I'm sort of coming to the end of a long transition, and I would say that what happens is that we started talking about negativity and that impulse for change, and that's what really starts to drive a transformation. So what's been happening for me in my life is that as I've gone through periods of transformation, big shifts, that now I find that I can go through really more difficult and more powerful shifts over time, where there's a huge shift in my perspective on the world. That takes a lot of skill to do because it's so painful, and it's really easy to want to medicate out of something like that. It's really easy to try to distract yourself away from it and avoid those shifts. So no, it definitely wasn't the end. It was definitely the beginning.
I'm so glad that you mentioned all of that at the end, because I think that that's what many of us have experienced, especially this year. This year has been crazy roller coaster for many of us, and I think it's just, there's something nice in knowing that you're not alone. I mean, I'm not glad that you or anybody else has these trials and things that they have to go through, but it's nice to know that we are not alone in it, and that we are kind of growing. Many of us are, and it is those things that grow us. But I'm so thankful for you being here today, Suzanne, and sharing your story with us, and we would love to maybe have you back on next season and chat a little bit more.
I'd love to be back, and I particularly want to say that you and Lori both, we've all been a part of transforming together. It's really important to plug into people, and it's nice now to know Don and Jamad and Tara as well, and to be a part of this circle. It's important, and I appreciate your having me here, and I appreciate being a part of this circle today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you.
So I am really excited that we have had this chat with her today, because I think that I would actually love to go around with all of us and maybe just share a little piece of what spiritual awakening has been like in our lives, and how that kind of ties into Suzanne's story as well. I know that for me, I had many moments looking back. I don't think I really had as profound of a, this is going to change my life, rather than a, oh crap, what is going on? I think it was more, mine was definitely more fear-based, I think there. But like having little things, and then the biggest thing for me, and it actually ties in beautifully to last week's episode as well, where we talked to Tina about her depression. I had severe anxiety and really thought that I just was losing my mind. I just didn't know how else to handle it. And I remember being on the floor during one of the last panic attacks that I had, on the floor in a ball, and shaking and not understanding what was going on with me, and just being in an extreme space of fear. And I think I love the last part of what she said, where she was talking about as time goes on, these awakenings have not gotten easier, and that has also been my experience as well. Donna, what about you?
Well, I too like that she said that about as time goes on, some of them get a little bit more difficult than others, and really, and we do want to self-medicate. I know my last one that I had 4 years ago, I turned to the bottle. I did a lot of drinking just because I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. I didn't want to. It was very intense. It was very everything around me was changing. People that I thought were very close to me weren't, and people that I put my trust into I shouldn't have, and people that I thought I couldn't put my trust into I could have, and I just totally misread all my life a lot of signals. And so when that slapped me upside the head, because the universe tends to have to do that with me. I don't learn very easily. You got to hit me and send me down some rabbit holes, and then we're good to go. And however, I did realize myself, I woke up one morning and went, you can't keep drinking like this. This is not good. You got to stop. So, and it wasn't quite that easy, but suffice it to say, I ended up walking away from that. So, so I did like that she said that about the self-medicating, because you can't really, and I know it doesn't seem like a joy in the moment that you're going through it. It really doesn't, but we really need to feel those emotions, because we are so programmed, at least here in the United States, to where you can't feel your emotions. And if you don't feel your emotions, you can't move forward and understand what's going on. So that was one of my biggest takes. It wasn't necessarily what she said, but that's kind of where I took that, is that you need to feel those emotions and walk through those emotions, whether you have to do like Jama did and travel across the United States to have your spiritual awakening, or do like I do and go over to the beach and scream at the ocean. I do that a lot. And it takes it, and it makes me feel better. And then I get in the water and it just feels like this whole calming effect just kind of hits me. So so there's just a lot of ways that you can work through that. And I think that's very important. And I think too, you need to reach out to people, and we do need to have those people to talk to, and that will listen to us, not try to change what we're feeling, or not try to, make the feeling go away per se, but just listen. Sometimes we just want somebody to just listen and just be there for us and understand that we just need that in that moment. So I didn't mean to go off on that long tangent. Again, I did that 2 weeks in a row. So how about yours, Lori?
I'll be brief. I'll shorten it. I mean, so I've had a couple of like really intense, big things happen, but what I think I have found through that is that each time for me, it's not necessarily that it's easier, but there's this sense of knowing that it's going to be okay, that it might feel like crap right now, but there's this inner strength and this connection that I think once you've kind of gone through something and you can tap into that, it makes, when you have those crises in your life, it can really make that easier, because there is that connection for me, once I found that connection never went away. And now it didn't look so pretty at times, but it was there, and it allowed me, I know, to get through things faster and easier and in a different way than if I hadn't had that connection. So I think that's the part that I want to kind of leave people with from my perspective, is that you can lean on that and count on that. And that can make the shitty times like a lot less shitty. Sorry. But
I love that.